We can see our list of courses is loading great. If I open up the DevTools and go to the Network tab and reload, we can see our call to localhost 3001/courses, and we can see that response, which we are parsing. We're currently only displaying the course titles, so in the next clip, let's create a course list component that will display all the properties in this dataset. We're currently only displaying the course title, but there's a lot of other data that's being sent down from our API that we could also display. We're also currently handling the presentation within our course page container, and that would ideally be handled by a separate component that just has presentation concerns. So let's go over to our courses folder and create a new file. We'll call this file courselist.js. I'm going to paste this component in. Again, you can get this file from the before folder for this module. This is a functional component. I'm also using React Router DOM because we have a link in here that will link to a particular course. Notice that it looks for the course slug, which is one other piece of data that's in our data set. This is what we want to show in the URL. Our table header displays title, author, and category headers. Then we map over the list of courses, and for each one of the courses, we output a table row. I'm using the course ID as the key and providing a button to be able to click to watch the course by clicking over and going to the Pluralsight URL. Down here we show the course's author ID and category as well. Finally, down at the bottom, we have the prop types declared. In this case, the only prop this component accepts is an array of courses. Although I just realized this should be prop types.array. Back up at the top, I should also clarify that I am destructuring props here in the function signature. If this looks odd to you, recognize that every functional component receives props as an argument, so I could choose to destructure props on a separate line within this component. This is equivalent to if I were in here, and precise arrow syntax by up. Then down in render, we can put it to use. We'll say course list, and we will pass it courses on props. This means we don't need these lines down here anymore. Let's load up the browser and see our results. This looks much better. And if you hover over the watch buttons or the links to the courses themselves, we can see that the slug that's part of the course dataset is being injected into the URL. However, notice that the author column lists the author's ID. In the next clip, let's display the author's name instead. The course data that we're receiving is normalized. It contains the author's ID, but not their name. So to display the author's name for each course, we're going to need to retrieve the list of authors. This is a good chance for us to practice the entire Redux flow. The process for loading authors will be the same as for loading courses. So I'm over here in action types.js. Let's add a new action type constant. Copy it. New file actions extremely similar to course actions.js, so why don't we come over here and copy it. We'll come over to author actions, and it is going to be loading from the author API. We don't need the create story here, but we do need load author success. It's going to accept a list of authors. The type here is going to be load authors success. The payload will be authors instead of courses. Down here, our thunk will be called load authors. And instead of calling course API, we will call author API. And instead of calling get courses, we will call get authors. That will return a list of things. Reducer.js. And again, this is going to be very similar to our course reducer. So let's just copy it, paste it over here, and change a few things. We're going to call it author reducer. It will initially have an empty array for state. We don't need the create, but we do need a load success. So we'll have load author success. We'll return the action, which will be that array of authors. Finally, and this is very easy to forget, but we need to go update our root reducer to reference this new reducer that we've created. So click over here on index. And below, let's jump so that this component can request author data. First at the top, let's import author actions. Then let's jump down to map dispatch to props. Remember, this is where we specify the actions that we'd like to pass in on props. Right now, we're passing in all course actions under a prop called actions. Instead, we can pass the specific actions that we need to bind action this to say load author, load courses. So I will paste this in. And then change it to say load authors. The array that's getting state to prop. in each author's name with each record. So first, instead of just returning plain courses, we can map over that list of courses, and for each course, we can return the existing course, but also add an author name property to our object. To get that author name, what we will do is look in our Redux store for that list of authors and find the author that has the relevant ID. And we'll return the name property. I do have an extra comma up here, so we'll fix that. We'll also return the list of authors, which we will set to state.authors. I'll explain why we need to pass authors in as well in a moment. First, there's a safety check that I should place above our call to map. Remember, course and author data are each requested separately and asynchronously, and we need to assure that they're both available before I can weave the author's name in right here. So let's do a check for whether author data is available. We'll say state.authors.length equal to 0, and if it's equal to 0, then we will return an empty array. Otherwise, we'll do what we were doing before. I'll hit save, and Prettier reformats this. So I'm using a ternary operator. Let's talk through what this is doing. I want to pass in courses on props. If we don't have any author data yet, we're going to return an empty array. If we do have author data, then we're going to map over that array of courses, and we will enhance that existing array. Each element in that array will have an extra property called author name, which we are setting by looking through the list of authors to find the corresponding author that has the corresponding author ID. We set that record to that author's name. Now that we're including the author's name in our array of courses, we can jump over to our course list component and consume it. Let's go down here to where we were displaying author ID, and instead we should be able to say author name. same. Let's check the browser and see if it worked. Says from the API did mount. We can fix this issue. Request courses and authors again. That's rather wasteful. We can see that if we go to the network tab, clear this out, I'll go to home, I'll go to courses, and there it requested both courses and authors. And each time I come to this page, it requests courses and authors again. That's rather wasteful. We really only need to request courses and authors once. So over in component did mount, we can fix this issue. Let's add an if statement right here, and we'll say if this.props.courses.length is equal to 0, that's the only time that we want to load our list of courses. I'm going to copy this line because we need to do the same thing down here for our authors. Except we need to say if this dot props.authors.length is equal to 0, then request the authors. Notice also that ESLint is, let's go back up to component did mount because I want to show how to declare authors on prop. Now that I've done that, I can remove the redundant this.props from our calls inside. Side of here. Ah, that's better. Let's go check the browser and make sure we haven't broken anything. Now when I reload the courses page, it does request courses and authors, but when I switch between the pages, we're no longer making additional network requests. Much more efficient. Now we are dispatching actions on load and we're weaving data from multiple APIs together in our map state to props function. Again, this was a lot of moving parts because we just stood up a whole new slice of state in place. But the larger we currently have two reducers, author reducer and course reducer. And now that we have multiple reducers, it's a little harder to picture our store's complete shape. So I like to declare initial state in a single spot. This way, we clearly document the Redux store's shape. In the reducers folder, let's create a new file. We can call it initialstate.js. Inside, we're going to declare a simple object structure that says that courses is an empty array and authors is an empty array. Now we can open each reducer and reference this initial state. I'm going to import initial state. From /initial state. Then, instead of hard coding, I will say I'm going to open my course, paste in my, and then call initial state.courses. Now, if developers want to understand the Redux store's shape, they can simply view initial state.js. This completes our initial coverage of async in Redux using thunks. Let's wrap up this module with a summary. In this module, we began by considering the merits of AI. I highly use Redux. It can be used for the concept of Redux by running your own code on every call. Once you get comfortable with thunks, consider looking at approaches for handle success and failure from your API calls by convention. Course data. Now that we're comfortable with handling async calls for updating courses, using thunks to load course data asynchronously, let's put these new skills to use for creating and updating courses. This module is all code. We're going to create a full course management page that allows us to asynchronously create and update course data. We'll compose the form by creating a few reusable form inputs, and we'll initially populate the form using our Redux store's data via a combination of map state to props and the useEffect hook. All right, back to the editor. Let's keep coding. In the last module, we saw how to load data into the Redux store. In this module, you'll see how to add and edit data in the Redux store. We're going to enhance the app to support adding and editing courses. We're going to handle adding and editing courses on a dedicated page. So let's create a new component in the Courses folder called Manage Course Page. To avoid creating components from scratch, I like to generate boilerplate code via my editor. For example, I enjoy using the React Code Snippets extension in VS Code. With that extension installed, I can type RCC to generate a React class component. It creates the boilerplate for extension. But in this case, let's copy the courses page as a starting point. Because the Manage Course page is going to be similar in some ways. First, let's use the Find and Replace to replace the references to Courses page with Manage Course page. And I'll click this button over here to replace all instances. Let's remove the import for the course list, since we won't be displaying a course list on this page. If someone loads our Manage Course page directly, we're still going to want to load our course and author data. So we'll go ahead and leave component did mount as is. Let's change the header down here to say Manage Course. Then jump down to Map State to props. We can greatly simplify this because we simply need to return state.courses and state.authors. And back up in Render, I should have also removed the reference to course list. This gives us a good boilerplate for the Manage Course page. Let's jump to the top and let's review the major sections. At the top, we import the core libraries that we'll need in any container component: React, prop types, and the connect function, class compiler function. And down below, we have our prop types declaration, the redux mapping functions that determine what state and actions we'd like to access in our component, connects our component to redux. Earlier in the course, I showed 4 different ways to handle map dispatch to props. Let's use the object form of map dispatch to props now to simplify our code. If we declare map dispatch to props as an object instead of a function, so instead to remove, so now and load courses. But this does mean we no longer say actions dot here anymore, so these calls get a little bit shorter. Courses, put my comma up here, object form. So now our mapping logic is more concise. Okay, a quick warning before I move on. I'm about to show a little tweak that makes map dispatch to props even shorter, but it is admittedly a bit confusing. You can decide if the benefit is worth the potential. That's the only action that we're calling out of here. Now that I'm doing this, I can jump down into our map dispatch to props function. And I no longer need to say right hand side. However, here's the courses and load author action creators at the top. Then I'm using map dispatch to props to pass them in on props, on props. So I've shown you many different, it's easy to, in the next clip, since we've just created a new page, we need to update routing to support it. So let's open app.js and add the route. Import Manage Course page from courses/manage course page. Then down here we need to add 2 routes. So I'm going to copy the existing route. And for our first route, we want /course/:slug. And we want that to load our manage course page. Our second route is almost the same, but it won't contain the slug. As you can see, we expect the second segment of the URL to provide the course slug. You can think of the slug like the course's ID. Like an ID, the slug is unique. But unlike an ID, the slug is friendlier to read in the URL than a number. Remember, our routes are wrapped in switch, so only one route inside switch can match. The moment the React router finds a matching route, it stops searching. So if it finds a slug in the URL, it will stop here. This is why we need to make sure that the slug route is declared first. Otherwise, this shorter course URL would match, so our slug route would never load. Now that we've created the routes, let's see if we can load the page. I can click on Courses. And if I click on a course, I can now see the Manage Course header successfully. The Manage Course page is now rendering, but it doesn't need to be a class component. In the next clip, let's convert Manage Course page to use hooks instead. Let's convert this class into a functional component and use React's useEffect hook to replace componentDidMount. If you haven't tried hooks yet, they were added to React in early 2019 in React 16.8. Hooks allow us to handle state and side effects within function components, so we typically don't need to declare class components anymore. Switching this to a function component using hooks requires a few tweaks. First, switch the class to a function. Hooks only work with function components. I could just move this line up here, but I like to destructure props within the function signature because it's a little more concise. So let's cut this and paste it in right here. Now I can remove that declaration to access all of these variables that we've destructured. Now let's go up to the top, and on our import statement for React, we're going to pull in the useEffect hook. We're going to use this hook to replace our usage of component did mount, because useEffect lets us handle side effects. UseEffect accepts a function that it will call. In this function, we'd like the same logic to run. So let me come down here and close our UseEffect call. We no longer need to declare render in a function component because it is implied. So I'll take these extra curly braces out. So we have our return statement for our functional component, and then nested inside this function component is our UseEffect hook. Right now, the way this is coded, this effect will rerun every time that the component renders. We want this to only run once when the component first mounts. So to do that, we can declare a second argument to UseEffect. We declare that argument as an array of items for it to watch, and if anything in that array changes, it will rerun this effect. Since we only want this to run once, we can declare an empty array here, and this is effectively the same as component did mount. This will only run once when the component mounts. Let's hit save, and then jump over to the browser. Our hook-based component is rendering, so we're on the right track. I'm a big fan of hooks, and I recommend declaring function components over class components because they tend to be easier to work with and understand. We've now implemented our first functional component that uses React hooks. In the next clip, let's create the form for managing courses. To save some typing, grab 3 simple React components from the before folder for this module: text input and select input, which are in the common folder, and course form, which is in the courses folder. I'll paste these in one at a time and discuss each. Earlier in the course, we created a simple inline form that allowed us to create a course with a title. Now let's create a more realistic form that utilizes child components to help enforce enhanced styling and functionality. In the courses folder, create a new file and call it courseform.js. I'll just paste this in. Then we can talk through it.